Hi, this is Jeff Herman. I am the author of Jeff Herman's Guide to Book Publishers, Editors, and Literary Agents, and you're watching Mr. Media.
I'm Bob Andelman, and this is a Mr. Media interview. You can see, hear, and read more than 1,000 of my previous celebrity interviews at mrmedia.com. That's mrmedia.com. Subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Alexa Podcasts, or Stitcher, and follow me on Twitter and Facebook. And if you like the show, please tell the world with a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. On today's show, I'll talk to literary agent Jeff Herman, author of the author and wannabe author Bible, Jeff Herman's Guide to Book Publishers, Editors, and Literary Agents. Who they are, what they want, how to win them over. This is Jeff's second appearance on Mr. Media. Stick around. We all have a little bit of the fanboy or fangirl in us. Sometimes it surprises us at the times it chooses to surface. For me, one of those days came in April 2017 when I was a keynote speaker at a business writers conference in Birmingham, Alabama, and I met Jeff Herman, a fellow conference guest whose work as a writer and literary agent has meant so much to me over the past 25 years. Now, if you've ever written or thought about writing a book, unagented, Jeff Herman's Guide to Book Publishers, Editors, and Literary Agents, Who They Are, What They Want, How to Win Them Over, is the one book you must own and study. If you only know me, for example, as the host of this podcast, you may not know that I make my living as a co-author of more than 15 books. In my early days, I always kept a copy of the Herman Bible on my desk. Jeff and his wife, Deborah Herman, also wrote another important book for any would-be author's library, Write the Perfect Book Proposal. This is Jeff's second visit to Mr. Media. And Jeff Herman, welcome back to Mr. Media.
Great to be here.
I think my wife was a little embarrassed by how excited I was to meet you. Was my enthusiasm at the time a little bit over the top, or did I keep it in check?
I didn't notice any aberrations. I thought, you were very well behaved, and, other people were commenting, and, there was, but I defended you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much. It's funny. I really have valued the first book. I think I've bought it 3 times over the years. I'm a good customer. Even when my career was going and I had an agent, I still felt like it was good to have around, in part for the listings, because it helps you know what publishers are looking for, so you can kind of focus on that. And then the articles at the beginning of the book, sometimes they're very basic and sometimes they're very specific, and they're just really good to to go back over again, even when you're established and you're professional, as the case may be.
That means a lot to me coming from you, because you're a seasoned writer. You've been through the process. You're a veteran. So getting that kind of response from someone of your caliber is very affirming for me. Thank you.
Sure. I'm thinking that there are best-selling authors that whose writing we can all admire, whose success we can admire. But I'm also thinking that on the business side of writing, I just couldn't think of anyone with the impact that I think that you have in terms of explaining, how book publishing works to a neophyte and kind of unlocking the kingdom with detailed information. How did this all start? I mean, because you had your own practice as a literary agent, you still do. Why would you want to take this on?
Well, I came into book publishing as in my mid-20s, early 20s, and became an agent when I really had no business becoming an agent, because I didn't go through the proper channels and didn't have I wasn't actually mentored or trained, frankly, the way maybe I could have been or should have been. But I didn't know that. And that's always a great advantage, is not only not knowing the rules, but not even knowing maybe that there are certain rules or protocols that you're expected to understand. So that's very liberating, sort of not having that structure. But there was a lot I needed to figure out from scratch. And that gave me a great deal of empathy with other people who are sort of clueless and want the result. They want to get a book published. And for whatever reason, I enjoyed every time I figured that process out and found ways to bypass it or to sort of re-educate the process so it works better for itself and for the people who are doing it. Every time I would kind of figure that out, I would actually enjoy passing it on and giving other, even if they weren't going to necessarily work with me. It didn't matter to me. I just thought that it felt good. I mean, maybe it sounds ridiculously altruistic, but it to me, it felt very good to kind of take down these artificial walls and kind of spread out the power a little bit.
Well, and obviously sharing that information hasn't hurt your I call it a practice. I mean, it hasn't hurt your agency work. You're still a busy agent. You still got your publishing going on. But some people just feel like, oh, I can't give out that information. That's then what will I have? I have nothing.
I don't. It may just be that they are afraid to really think about or explain what it is they're doing. Sometimes, if your answer is, "Well, I can't give that out," it just may be that you don't really know how to articulate it, and that's okay. I mean, the way I really try to approach this business every day is I try to approach it in a way, I guess you could call it humility, meaning, gee, I just maybe know 1 or 2% of what there is to know, which about puts me on par with most of my peers. So my goal is to see what I can chip away at that other 98% on any given day about what I don't know, or what can I forget that I think I know, and maybe learn it all over again in a better way so that I don't get boring, so that I don't get bored. And if I keep that mindset going, that I can make this new for myself and for those who choose to work with me, it just becomes more interesting.
Certainly in the last decade, the business has changed quite a bit, I would think.
Oh, yes. Yeah. There's been major disruption, which if you're in the middle of it, basically someone who was used to doing things before the disruption, I almost said disruption, and had to evolve through it, it was painful. If you're someone who's just starting out now, after the disruption, it's much easier to adjust to it because you didn't know what it was before.
Is digital a big part of that, or is it the mergers and acquisitions, or is it all of the above?
Well, the technology. I frankly do not know how to assess how the technology has really. I feel the technology is secondary. I feel that what has really impacted the book publishing business and really the media business and just business in general is, in my experience, the disappearance of what used to be literally mom and pop publishing and mom and pop bookstores, pretty much everywhere. If I signed up a project as an agent, let's say in 1990 or 1995, or even as late as 1999, there would have been maybe 50 independent publishers that I could have shown this to and perhaps done a deal with. Most of those mom and pops are gone. They got either bought out by what's known as the Big Five corporations, which are these multinational global operations, or they went out of business. So the pool of people that I can do business with has shrunk, and the human individuality of these parties has greatly diminished.
I would think, as you were talking about that, I was trying to think of on the digital side, on the technology side, maybe two things that have really changed how long has it been since, I think my first book was published in 92, so 25, 26 years. I think early on, one of the big things that's changed since then is being able to submit a manuscript electronically.
Right.
Although even as that got easier, there were still editors who wouldn't touch a digital file They still wanted a big pile of paper sent to them. And then completely different from that is because of so many small publishers that have gone away and rights that have expired, publishing rights have expired. I think that there's a lot of, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think there's probably a lot of mid to lower level books that have been published and sold over the years that have disappeared from the fray, that the authors or their estates could probably profit by putting them back into the digital stream, and that's not, I don't think that that's been done enough, but maybe I'm
Well,
wrong.
if you look at on Amazon, I mean, or some of the others, such as, there are many.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you'll see that there are literally millions of books that are just published by the individuals
Mm-hmm.
who wrote them. So that part of it it's very easy to upload anything, and because we live in a great democracy, there's no one's going to arrest you in most cases. There's obvious exceptions for for uploading it. So the key is, that digital distribution is an open door,
Mm-hmm.
but the key is how do you bring people to know about it so that they will actually purchase it. The access is easy. It's, purchasing it is easy, assuming the person has online capacity.
Mm-hmm.
But the key is, how do you create a community of people who want to purchase my product, even if it was published quite successfully in the past?
Mm-hmm.
How do you re-energize all of that? And that's something that traditional publishers are always trying to figure out themselves, and they're not necessarily that good at it.
Mm.
And that's one of the reasons why they are so discriminating about what they publish, is because they often don't have a clue about how they're going to be able to sell it. I will have that happen. Other agents will have that happen, where they'll say, this is an excellent book, but we don't know how to bring it to the marketplace in a way that's going to be effective for us, for you, and the author.
Well, and the thing that most authors, new authors especially, don't understand, I think you deal with this in the new edition a little bit, is that the publishers are not going to spend the next 6 months promoting and marketing your book. You might get a week of their attention, maybe a little more, depending on how much they invest in the advance and what they see the potential is. But then you're kind of on your own. You got to have your own plan.
Yeah. Now, the reality today, as it was for the whole time I've been in book publishing, is that book publishers are not marketers. A place like a consumer products company like Procter and Gamble will hire the best people out of an MBA program and pay them competitive salaries in the six figures when it comes to marketing. In book publishing, it's really upside down. They will hire English majors and say, well, maybe instead of being an editor, you'd like to be in our marketing department. And, pay them a non-competitive salary compared to what a real marketing pro would get. And so the book publishers, for whatever reason, and that's a whole other discussion, have never really been modeled to merchandise and promote the product. It's really based upon a word of mouth situation, which will hopefully precedes the publication of the book, is what they're hoping, which is why they're always looking for people who are already very evolved in their communities, their online communities.
Well, and this example you just gave, this is kind of how you fell into the business, right? I mean, you tell this story in the latest edition that you didn't have any experience. They needed a publicity assistant.
Yeah, I was 22 years old, and I answered a blind ad in the New York Times and went for an interview. And it was a mom and pop publishing company, a successful one with a long history. And I was interviewed by the director of publicity, and I thought, wow, that's a big title. And I became her assistant, which I thought was a big title. The department was me and her. She hired me on a Monday, took a vacation on a Tuesday, and said, you're in charge for the next 2 weeks. But I didn't even really use an IBM Selectric at that point.
Wow. It's a great story. I hope those types of stories are still happening to kids today out of college. I don't know. I don't know if they are in the same way, but the book publishing industry in a lot of ways hasn't really changed. I mean, they're not. They're not, as you say. I mean, they're not hiring the high end kids to come in and work their gigs. They're looking for kids that want to be around books and words, and that's more
Yeah,
important to them.
it's a funny business because if you're into money per se, you'll go downtown, you'll go to Wall Street, or you'll go to one of the law firms. It's like if you want to be in book publishing, I'm not even talking about as a writer, but you just want to be a professional editor and be in that business, money cannot be one of your priorities. Because your salary after 20 years, but on today's dollars, might max out, in like $150,000 after 20 years of labor, and but the people who I know who are in the industry, they're fine with that
Yeah.
because they love what they're doing. They're doing exactly what they want. They weren't chasing the big dollars.
I don't know. I don't know why we do it. So let's talk about this year's edition of the book. What's changed the most? What's new in this edition that you want to bring people's attention to?
Okay. Well, what is becoming clear is that, as I've said, there has been a huge consolidation of the actual publishers. So now what you have is, instead of this universe of 30 or 40 viable publishers, you have about 30 independent publishers, and then there used to be well over 100, and then you have these big five conglomerates. Within them, they all have like 20 divisions, some of which have the brand names, the legacy brand names, and the catalogs that go back 100 or 200 years. But the other big change, and that's okay. Once you adjust to working with them and that system, you can succeed. You can do fine. The other big thing I see is with the agencies, there is an attrition that I'm seeing going on with independent agencies, and there's been more consolidation. Not conglomerate, nothing like that. Okay, it's not like major 8-figure things going on. But what it is what used to be a 1 or 2 agent shops has now consolidated with maybe 3 other small business shops. So now you have almost like a law firm, a loose law firm, or a partnership that of maybe 10 agents, each with their own specialty. So I have been experiencing and observing more of that, and it'll be interesting to see if everybody can get along with each other and generate enough revenue so that everybody can be satisfied.
You're implying that agents have egos?
Well, it helps to be somebody who is very self-structured if you're going to enjoy being an agent. It requires that kind of personality. And so if you put 10 independent, self-thinking people together in an operation where they all have to cooperate with each other and create a pecking order, so to speak, as any organization requires. It always requires a pecking order, however you want to assign it. I think it must be a challenge for a lot of people who weren't used to doing it that way.
I think I can see that. I think the best agent I've ever had was still my first agent, and who was just took no crap from anybody. There was no. He didn't see no as a bad thing. It just meant he had to keep working harder at it. And he was full of himself, a bit arrogant. If he's watching this, you know who you are. But I admired that. That's the guy you wanted working for you. It's kind of like a good lawyer. When you see that lawyer fighting for somebody else and they just are aggressively representing their client in a legal case, well, if you get in trouble, that's the guy you want to hire. And I feel the same way about the agent.
Yeah, you need that. A word that comes to mind is almost that codependence, where the agent is actually treating your situation as if it was his or her own, and has that sense of ownership, so that their ego is right up there, so that their needs are almost the equivalent of your needs.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the agent side of things, because I think the publishing it's kind of self-evident. Folks, you get the book, and if you want to write a book on sewing, you're going to look through there and find the publishers that do books on sewing. If you're doing nonfiction or business books, you find the people that match up with that. Now, agenting is a little more challenging waters, I think, because you got to find someone who is interested in what you're interested in. But you were talking about the one agency might have 10 agents in it now, whereas it used to be maybe they would each have their own separate place. What do you look for? Should you be frightened off by someone who has a list? They publish on the internet on their website. Well, we have these 200 or 300 people. Should that scare you off, or should that encourage you, or do you just have to look that much more closely at them?
It shouldn't discourage you or really encourage you. I mean, the agency is just trying to establish to you as a prospective client that, hey, we're successful and we've been doing this for a while. Mm-hmm. We know where bodies are buried. We can do this. So that should be affirming. The reason why the agency model exists and still exists is because the book publishers do not want to have to deal directly with unpublished writers. They don't want to deal with a writer until they know that the writer has already been vetted and qualified and eligible for commercial publication. And that's basically the agent's primary purpose as far as the publisher is concerned, mm-hmm. is we do the screening. We do the qualifying. And they know that if it came through our screening process, it's something that they're not going to waste their time looking at. Whereas they don't have, obviously, that surety if it comes in directly from someone they don't know.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong as I say this. Yeah, I think the idea with the agent is that the agent isn't going to take on a book or a client that they can't sell.
Right.
I mean, it's that simple. If
it's commission based.
Right. So if I send you it's 15%, I think. If I send you my proposal for a book on the history of ice cream, if you look at it, I don't know, I'm just making this up. I'm not doing a book on the history of ice cream, folks. But if you look at it and you don't go, wow, this is stuff I never heard before. It's funny. It's sexy. It's I see ice cream in a whole different light. You're going to be like, I can't sell this. This is dreck. This is terrible. But if it excites you, then you assume it'll excite someone at a publishing house. That's
right.
Simple.
Every agent is looking for his or her 15%. And if we get into a habit of pitching projects to publishers which do not have the requisite merit to even be considered, we lose our access. Mm-hmm. We're no longer effective as an agent or can't become effective. So we need to be very discerning as to what we're going to put our reputations behind. We have to value the access and the relationships we have with the publishers, and can't really do anything to burn that. We can't burn our credibility in that context. That said, we all have our own areas of interest. I mean, I probably have rejected romance novels that went on to become bestsellers. I don't know it. I won't remember it. But I'm sure I have, for the simple reason that I'm rejecting 99.99% of the romance pitches I receive. And if somebody actually, went and did a little research on my particular agency, they would see that it was probably misguided to send me a romance novel, because it was almost virtually 100% likelihood that I would reject it. Mm-hmm. But if they sent it to another agent who basically just does romance novels and women's fiction and so on, their odds are a lot better than 100% that they'll be rejected. So that kind of, we're not all just all over the place. We all have areas of focus.
It hadn't occurred to me before, but I think I find, as someone who works mostly as a co-author, so I'm helping other people tell their stories, nonfiction stories for the most part, I have to be discerning probably in a very similar way to what you do, or to whoever's representing me at the time, in that I'm turning away probably about 85 to 90% of the people who come to me and say, hey, you should help me write my book. I've got a great story. And I'm like, okay, usually the first thing I do to rule them out is, Are you going to pay me? Or are you expecting me to do this for free? Because I don't work
Money
for free.
talks.
Well, it's true, right? I mean, you're looking for your 15%. I'm looking for someone who can pay me because I'm going to be working with their ego for the next 6 to 12 months. And I want to make sure that I get paid up front. So that right there, that closes the door on about 75% of the things that come along. And then it's like, well, is this even interesting? I used to be where I would take everything that came my way because I like to work and I like to be busy. And then I realized there was no real great percentage in that if it was dumb or they hadn't really thought things out. I mentioned in the opening, everybody's got an idea for a book, and probably everybody has a book in them because our lives are so unique and our perspective is so unique. But you still have to be able to find the story there, find the narrative, find whatever it might be. So I think people have to be they have to understand that it's it's not all going to fly. Now, that having been said, has there ever been a better time for a first-time author to get published, either traditionally or untraditionally?
That's an excellent question. And in my opinion, the opportunities are static. I don't think that they have really diminished. It's just ways of making it happen have evolved. Mm-hmm. And one way that is possible now that used to not really be as possible, nothing was ever impossible, was the self-publishing method. A lot of people have risen to very prosperous situations in traditional publishing as authors, but their genesis was as a self-publisher. I have a book that I just sold very recently, which the author put himself on Amazon under Kindle. And for many reasons, not just for luck, but for many deliberate, calculated reasons, he was able to bring himself to about a 300 ranking, just as a digital download, no overhead. Mm-hmm. His only overhead was writing the book, which was actually a very arduous process, a nonfiction book. And then it created a word of mouth whirlwind because of the subject matter and because of his communities. And sure enough, publishers were very interested and are now going to do a rapid turnaround. And we've sold the rights to a traditional publisher. And the reason why he wanted that was because he likes writing. He really doesn't want to be a publisher. And because he was entirely reliant upon Amazon as his only platform, which is fine. But as a lone publisher, he wasn't going to get access to Barnes and Noble and their still tremendous traditional network, or the independents bookstores, which are still actually making a comeback, is the funny thing. So there were many reasons for him to take the next step up, but he realized the way to launch himself and to make it happen was to just write it because he felt he had to. And then let it happen.
Well, and it seems to be, in my experience the last 5 years there have been a lot of hybrid opportunities for book publishing that I've come upon. I don't know if I'm on the edge of these things.
Yeah, those scare me. And it may just be because I see things that, if somebody isn't in the business and they decide to write a book and they see those pitches, online on a website, or they go to a conference somewhere and they're pitched about that, they may be up against a very painful learning curve, an expensive learning curve. Mm-hmm. And that's why, me as a veteran, I tend to be a little more cynical because I know what questions to ask. And I know what, so there is a lot of quality out there, but for every quality, true opportunity, I would think that there's maybe 5 to 10, the ratio, that aren't really going to bring the writer to the result that they're looking for and could actually be very costly and demoralizing in a lot of ways. So those so-called hybrid situations, if that's what you were referring to, because you have to remember you're going to be expected to pay for things.
Well,
Whereas the traditional model, you don't have to pay for things.
Right.
It's sweat equity.
The ones that I've dealt with have been where companies, CEO has wanted to do a book, but doesn't want to be controlled by an editor per se. They don't want the editor to have the final word on what goes in and what goes out or what it looks like. So what they want to do is they want to hire a writer to write the book before they've even dealt with a publisher. Then they want to have their own design and marketing people have at it, and then they'll do like a hybrid publishing deal where they'll contract with the publisher to distribute and produce the book and make sure it's of high standards, but they will control it themselves, and that's the kind of thing that
All right,
I've
there
been
may
dealing
be
with.
a model that I'm not that familiar with, just because agents, I think to a certain extent, agents are not in that process, first of all, because there's really no need for us.
That's a good point.
Everything is really being purchased by the person at the top, who obviously has the resources or is finding the resources to pull it all together. Uh, at the end of the day, if you are going to go to a traditional publisher, they will demand control, even if it already exists. I mean, the example I just gave you, I mean, they are going to put this book through an edit, even though it's already been self-published. They will put it through their own edit for legal reasons, if no other reason. And they will say, our version, these are the changes we need for our version. They may even want to retitle it. And these are things that a traditional publisher is going to decide are their prerogatives. There are obviously exceptions to the rule, as when the writer has so much commercial power that it's basically the other way around. I mean, there are a handful of individuals and established authors that basically can tell any publisher, the biggest publisher, how they're going to do it. And the publisher would say, oh, yeah, of course, that's what we were thinking anyway, because of the person's commercial power. But there may be avenues that you're discussing that I just don't have direct experience with. And they may be really good. They may be, really work out very well.
Well, I'll save our viewers and listeners the details of that. But if you want, when we're done talking, I'll give you some detail about that kind of thing from my experience, anyway. What else do you want people to know about the new edition of the book? What else stands out for you that
Well, if you're coming to the business as either as a first timer or even not as a first timer, it's very good to kind of know the map of what publishing is and really why it is that some books get published commercially by a traditional publisher and why so many others, most that get written, are not making it there, are not getting the traditional publishing. And one of the things I discovered very early on, 30 odd years ago, was that the quality of a person's writing was one factor, but it may have, in many instances, it was a secondary factor, especially when it comes to nonfiction. Yes, they want you to be a good writer, but they also want you to bring many other qualities, such as a good thinker, how to put your information into a concept and into a title and into a focus that really makes people remember your book and feel the need to go out and buy your book. They need people who know how to generate their own consumer demand
platform,
and then basically just use the publisher as the delivery vehicle.
They want you to have a platform. They want you to have a way. Maybe you have 10 or 20,000 Twitter followers, or
it certainly makes a big difference, and it always did. I mean, even before the digital community, the term used to be go viral, through a wire service. How do you get so when I was in publicity, there were many wire services. I mean, the big one was Associated Press, but there were many others also. And the big deal was to try to get these things viral through print. And then everybody would follow print. The radio was still extremely important, really right up to the early part of this century. Most communities had viable local radio programming that people actually listened to. And media tours were very crucial at the time, physical physically going to all these 20 different markets sometimes. So the technology, has certainly changed, but the intention has not changed, which is to make people pay attention and feel the need to go buy your book.
All right, last question about this, and then one other thing we want to talk about. What are the most common mistakes that a newbie and even an experienced writer makes in approaching an agent or approaching a publisher for the first time? And obviously the answer to the latter is don't approach the publisher, find an agent.
Right. And I address a lot of these issues in the book. The issue is to understand that the publisher and the agent have to go through, are rejecting more than 99% of what they're seeing. Each agent is rejecting more than 99%, and each publisher is rejecting more than 99% of what they see. So why is that? You have to be very sensitive to the fact that there's a lot of noise. And every time an agent is opening up a file or opening up a letter, they are looking for an excuse to throw that out to get to the next one because of the volume of incoming, and we're not just all about the incoming. We have to service those we already have. So you need to figure out a way to have attention really from the word, the very first word, the very first sentence. And it isn't something you can do verbally. It's something you have to do in the email or in the query letter. There has to be a reason to read the second line. There has to be a reason to read the second paragraph, because a poorly constructed first paragraph or first sentence is going to be a reason to stop and then go to the next submission.
So if I open my query letter to your wife and say, "Dear Deborah, I'm writing this sitting here naked in my backyard by the pool. I'd like to tell you about this book idea I had." Is that a good start or a bad start?
Well, that sounds a little creepy. So,
even as I was saying,
everything's in the eyes of the beholder. So I can't speak for Deborah. I mean, I would think it's a little creepy.
Yeah.
But though if you told, well, never mind, I don't want to get myself in trouble here. But there were things that I would not find creepy that I might find intriguing, but for the wrong reasons. And you don't want me to see you in a context other than the one you want me to, which is as a writer. Right. So be careful about that. Sometimes one little trick I tell people is if you do a little research, either from my book about who the agents are and so on, and or other research, you can have something that you know about that agent that's specific to that agent. So if I'm opening up a letter and the very first thing that it's telling me is how great I am, it's about me. It's not about the person sending me the query letter, but it's telling me how wonderful I am and how they've admired me, for hundreds of years. They've been admiring me before I was even born. They were admiring me, and before they were born, they were admiring me. There's something about me that makes me have to keep reading. I don't know if it's just me, or if it's people in general, but somehow all of a sudden this letter becomes about me, and I'm absorbed, I'm consumed, and I have to keep reading. Now, at some point, there may be a reason for me to think this is a book I might want to consider for representation. So there's going to have to be some kind of follow-up besides the fact that you got my attention. Because at the end of the day, I do have to make a living. I'm not going to just do you a favor because, you were kissing up to me. But I am paying attention.
So my introduction to the podcast, it sort of worked and it sort of didn't work, right? Okay, the last thing I want to ask you about, you and your wife, Deborah Herman,
yes,
have something called the Writers and Editors Network. Do you want to just put in a little plug for that?
wanet.com. Well, it's in development. We already have about 5,000 subscribers to it, and what we are endeavoring to do is just build a different kind of community for writers and agents who can interact with each other for information and experiences and for business. Now, writers interacting with writers, and writers interacting with agents, and agents interacting with agents also. We're really trying to create a blended community that isn't just black and white, but is actually interactive on all kinds of professional levels.
Is there any cost for this, and where would people go to sign up?
No, you can just sign right up, and no one will bother you after that. It's all voluntary. Your participation and access is all voluntary. There are no, I mean, yeah, I mean, I suppose at some point we will have things that people might actually pay money for so that, we can sustain it. But right now we're just looking to build the community.
Okay. Well, folks, listen, you can find the 2017 edition of Jeff Herman's Guide to Book Publishers, Editors, and Literary Agents, who they are, what they want, how to win them over, as well as Write the Perfect Book Proposal, another really good book that Jeff wrote with Deborah. They're in great bookstores everywhere, or you can order either one of them right now at a great price at mrmedia.com, mrmedia.com. If you are watching this on the website, below the video, you will see the cover of both books. Click on them, take you right to Amazon. You can have them to you in, well, maybe half an hour if drone service is available in your neighborhood. Otherwise, maybe in the next day or so. Are the books available as digital downloads now?
Yes, through Amazon, the Kindle.
Okay.
They've been Kindleized.
So you can download them immediately and get right to work. And I really mean it seriously. If you want to write a book, if you want to be a published author, you've got to have the Jeff Herman Guide. I mean, I wasn't making that up, folks. I really found it incredibly valuable. Every time I wear out one of my copies, I give it to some younger writer who's coming along and wants to do this. And it's a book you got to have. That's all there is to it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jeff, website, jeffherman.com. Is that still?
Yep, jeffherman.com, jeffherman.com.
All right. And people can also find you on social media, Twitter, Facebook, places like that?
I have to be honest, I don't do what we tell everyone to do, but I seem to get away with it.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm there. I could be found there.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. You're not active in it, though. All right.
I've been thinking for years that I ought to be more active, and I may think about it for a few more years.
Wait. Keep up your resistance. There has to be a holdout somewhere.
I still use an XP desktop. What can I say? And I still have a flip flop, whatever they call them, a flip phone.
Flip phone.
I don't have a smartphone.
You have is your Rolodex still a little flip thing?
I have a paper. Yeah, I keep it on my desk, and I'm comfortable.
We won't be looking
Works
for you.
For me.
We won't be looking for you on Snapchat anytime soon, Jeff. Listen, Jeff Herman, it was a pleasure. It really was a pleasure to meet you last year in person. It was just a great treat for me, and delightful to have you back here on Mr. Media for a second time. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's been my privilege.
Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience full of people just like you who know they have at least one good book in them to write, but they don't know how to get it published. In the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida.
Hi, this is Rich Scheidner. And if you've ever wondered what it was like to be a stand-up comedian in the 1980s, I'm going to do you a big favor. Instead of billions of dollars for a time machine, you can just spend $24.95 and buy my new book, Kicking Through the Ashes, My Life as a Stand-Up in the 1980s Comedy Boom. It will save you money and give you thrills. It will take you there. Go to my website, richscheidner.com, go to amazon.com, and buy this book.